incident which is fresh in our minds, all of us. You know that Ghana now has become a producer of oil and gas. And the story is that a couple of years ago, some of our friends in La Côte d'Ivoire said that part of the oil that Ghana was exploiting actually belonged to La Côte d'Ivoire. Some military generals in La Côte d'Ivoire actually threatened to go to war with Ghana to sack Ghana from the oil and gas fields that they thought belonged to La Côte d'Ivoire. Then wise counsel prevailed, and the two countries were advised to settle their differences in the international court, some international court for arbitration and so on. Why even we took that part is problematic for me. But we took that part. The court then decided that the oil and gas actually belongs to Ghana. I suppose that many Ghanaians began rejoicing. What actually happened? What happened was that the court declared that the oil and gas belonged to Ghana, but Ghana happily and readily handed over the oil and gas it had fought La Côte d'Ivoire to get to who? To Tulo, or Talo, or whatever, to companies from the United States of America and Britain. We were ready to go to war with La Côte d'Ivoire. We got it. And we took 17.5% and gave the rest to the multinational corporations from the West. Now, comrades, let's reverse. What would have happened if La Côte d'Ivoire had been declared the true owner of the oil and gas? What would have happened? What would simply have happened is that La Côte d'Ivoire would also have given it to Total of France. So we are ready to fight and kill ourselves to gain control of some resources, only to hand them over to multinational corporations from the capitals of the colonial metropolis. This is the sad African condition that we need to overcome. But it does not end there. There are many other stories. It doesn't end here. There are so many other stories that need to be told. Comrades and friends, all of our leaders in Africa say that poverty is getting exacerbated. Our people are getting increasingly poor. Their access to food is increasingly getting limited, and so on. But what is the excuse? The Russian-Ukrainian war. Now, when you hear our leaders talk like this, how do you feel? That Africa is hungry. In Ghana, food prices have risen 300% in the last 18 months. And the reason our leaders give is that Russia and Ukraine are fighting. And they think it's so sensible. So they look us in the face and tell us this cock and bull story. And they expect us to believe it. The truth is that Africa has 60% of the arable lands in the world. Now, if you have 60% of the arable lands in the world, and you are crying hunger, what are you? I wouldn't say it. I would allow Bob Marley to sing it. And what does Bob Marley sing? Bob Marley sings that in the face of abundance of water, the food is still thirsty. If you have 60% of the arable lands in the world, and you are still waiting for Ukraine to feed you, you fit into Bob Marley's description, which I would not repeat. There is talk about fertilizer. That we have run into difficulties because we don't have fertilizer and so on. Africa, we don't have fertilizer. My goodness. Not too long ago, there was a general in power in Ghana And his name was General Kutu Acheampong. Unfortunately, today, I took part in the struggles that led to the overthrow of General Kutu Acheampong. And today, I say in all honesty that in those years of the 70s, if we knew that Ghana would become what it has become today, perhaps we would not have struggled to overthrow Acheampong. Because the conditions there were far, far better than the conditions today. So there's some regret on our part. If we knew that the value-added tax will be raised to the levels it has been raised today, perhaps we would not have struggled against Jerry Rawlings when he introduced it at 11%, leading to the death of 6 people. 6 people died in that protest. Unfortunately, those of us who took part in those struggles leading to death of innocent children, men and women, have today been given the mantle of leadership. And we haven't done better than Jerry Rawlings, and we haven't done better than General Acheampong. And this is the situation in all of our African countries. All of our African countries, without exception. Dear friends, we are living in extremely dangerous times. We are living in times when petroleum prices are rising through the skies. We are living in times when food prices are rising. We are living in times where access to health care is increasingly becoming limited and so on. But we face some other dangers that are serious and worthy of our consideration. Nothing can be more dangerous to the survival of humankind than a thermonuclear war. A thermonuclear war will leave none of us alive. Life will be completely destroyed in a thermonuclear war. Indeed, I'm told that the world has acquired enough nuclear weapons that enables us to destroy the world more than 10 times over. Is one destruction not enough? Against the senseless arms race. And to build that new Africa that Nkrumah dreamt of, an Africa without a bomb. That is our responsibility. How do we construct that Africa without a bomb? How do we construct that Africa which would not be part of the promoters of the madness around us, which is likely to lead to a thermonuclear war? Today, in many parts of the African continent, military bases, foreign military bases are being established all over. I recall that not too long ago, an agreement was put before the Parliament of Ghana to sign the, what do they call it, Joint Defense Cooperation Agreement or whatever. And our government would not listen to reason. Indeed, they passed that law at night. Parliament met and passed that law at night. Our comrades and friends, why should we allow the United States of America to establish military bases on our soil when we are not allowed to establish military bases on their soil? Are we allowed to station 1,000 soldiers in Washington? Don't we have interest in Washington? Are there no Africans in the United States of America whose rights are being trampled upon, who are being killed, and so on? Don't we have an interest in what happens in the United States of America? And if we are not allowed to establish military outposts in the West, why do we allow the West to establish military outposts in our countries? In any case, we should not forget These military bases and outposts are not there to produce shoes. They are not there to increase the cultivation of cassava or tomatoes. The military bases are essentially for waging war, for killing, for massacre, for disrupting our countries and so on. We have a responsibility to wage a vigorous campaign throughout Africa to dismantle all of these military bases which are not in our interests. I earlier on made reference to the Cheney report. Cheney was commissioned by the government of the United States of America to evaluate U.S. energy needs over a certain period of time. Cheney came to the conclusion that the energy resource in West Africa was increasing and will continue to increase. And that in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East, it has become too difficult to maintain U.S. control over energy resources. And therefore, it was necessary for the U.S. to shift its attention to West Africa. And if need be, use its military strength to secure its interest in West African gas and oil. This is in the Cheney report. And in spite of this, the house niggers who occupy our presidential palaces and prime ministerial palaces and so on are signing agreements that enable them to establish their bases on our soil. We have a responsibility to resist them. With the same vigor we resisted the colonialists, with the same vigor that led to the removal of Goggisberg and others from the slave castle at Osu. That is our responsibility. We dare not fail, and we dare not wait for 2063. That battle must start today, and I'm sure that we will win. There is no doubt at all about the fact that we will win that battle. Some issues have been raised about our struggle, and they are important issues. You recall Patrice Lumumba, the democratically elected president of the Congo. And you recall that he was assassinated by Western intelligence agencies acting together. That's the reason. They killed him. The popular choice of the people of the Congo. They killed him. Now, these are the people who are telling us about democracy today. If they don't like you, they kill you, they dissolve your body in acid, they remove your front teeth as souvenir and so on. These are the Democrats who want to teach us democracy. And we listen to them. Then there's the case of Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. And you know that story, perhaps better than I do. Why? The British High Commissioner in Ghana then, his name was A.W. Snelling. And Snelling sent a cable to his home government, urging his own government to speed up the overthrow of the Nkrumah government. Because, in his own words, Kwame Nkrumah was making the African too politically conscious. And if they did not get rid of Kwame Nkrumah, they would not be able to achieve their interest in Africa. So they overthrew the Nkrumah government. And they came up with all kinds of propaganda, some of which persist today. Now, friends, I was a young man then when the coup occurred. In fact, on the morning of the coup, a few friends of mine went around watching the perpetrators of the coup commit heinous crimes against innocent Ghanaian citizens. I went to Kanda. You see the Kanda overpass, whatever it's called. You see those tiny story buildings there and so on. That was where some of Nkrumah's security personnel were staying. They pointed the nozzle of their armored vehicles into those flats and opened fire. And I saw furniture, refrigerators, and television sets falling from those flats down. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the raid at Accra New Town, and I saw the blood that flowed. I saw the raids at the Bavana Junction, and I saw the blood that flowed and so on. But don't forget that if this meeting, the meeting we are having today, if this meeting were to be held after 1969, all of us in this room will be candidates for prison. Some of us don't know. After 1969, the Ghanaian parliament sat under a certificate of urgency and passed a law prohibiting the printing, holding, and distribution of Nkrumah's photographs. It became a criminal offense. There you have him. All of us here are criminals by the 1969 definition. It didn't end there. Our universities, which are supposed to value books, what did our universities do? Our universities, including our university professors, the professors, they gathered all books written by Nkrumah and about Nkrumah, and any book about socialism, and burned them in bonfires to wild jubilation and celebration. It happened in Ghana. You understand? Happened in Ghana. Now, a continent, a people, a nation whose professors fear books. What is the future of that continent? What is the future of that nation? They fear books. They burn books. But that scenario has continued. We all know about the assassination of Thomas Sankara and many other leaders of the African Revolution. And the question has often been asked, anytime a leader emerges, they kill him. Of course, we know what happened to Madiba. We know that Madiba displayed extraordinary courage and so on. It didn't prevent them from putting him in prison for as long as they did. So the question that I'm often asked is, so any leader that emerges, they will catch him, put him in prison, kill him, destroy him, and so on. So why should we continue struggling? If another leader emerges, they will catch him and kill him. They will dissolve his body in acid. They will lock him up in prison like Madiba and so on. And my response is that we will never be defeated. The only people who are defeated are people who give up. So if you don't want to be defeated, never give up. Let's continue the struggle. How many of us can they kill? They kill one Madiba today, tomorrow morning there's another Madiba. They kill Kwame Nkrumah in the morning, by 11 o'clock in the morning there's another Kwame Nkrumah and so on. We will overwhelm them, we will defeat them, and we will build that prosperous, united Africa that our forebears told us was possible to build. We shall build it at all costs. Nothing will prevent us from building that Africa. So that's a challenge before us. You know, and there's an experience that I gathered with my presence here. I was introduced to the young men who were organizing this event. And knowing what I continued doing and what I did in the past and so on, I began asking questions about how they could ensure that this became a massive success. And the young man told me I shouldn't worry at all, that they are online, and that more than 1,000 people have registered to participate. Of course, I know this hall. If 1,000 people turn up here, it will be a huge crowd. But here we are. This is what we have today. So there is a limitation to organizing online. And African patriots and revolutionaries must realize that the online space is not the world. The world is in the farms and cottages of people who have never gone to school, who don't know how to read and write. We must get into the field and work with the people and learn from them. One of the most arrogant statements I hear all the time, every day I hear this statement, arrogance. Arrogance all over the place. People like us who have gone to school small, speak English small, and so on. And every time we talk, we are talking about going to educate the masses. What arrogance? What do you know to educate the masses? Us educating the masses? What do we know? Do you know how the cocoa crop is grown? Do you know how it's harvested? Do you know the technique for drying it up? Do you know the suffering the cocoa farmer has to go through and so on? Are you the one to go and educate the cocoa farmer? Let us be humble enough to understand that we are only participating in the struggles of the working class and the peasants. It is they who lead that struggle. It is the experiences which must guide us, and we should shake this irresponsible arrogance of talking down to them and pretending that we have something to teach them. We don't have nothing to teach them, and that must be clear to all of us. We must shed our arrogance in this struggle. This is an important struggle that we need to wage. Today, I want to end. And I want to end by focusing on the internationalist dimension of our struggle. Yes, we struggle as people of Africa. We struggle in order to change our conditions of poverty and underdevelopment. We struggle to build a new and united Africa. An Africa in which no child will go to bed on an empty stomach. That is our challenge. But we do that as Africans, fully conscious of the fact that there are others like us who are engaged in the same struggle. The imperialists, they coordinate, they collaborate, and so on to keep us here. It is also our responsibility to cooperate, to coordinate, to work together to defeat them. If they are united, we will be united. And this is the internationalist dimension of our struggle. Today, we have a duty to pay tribute to Commandant Fidel Castro, who, by proper definition, is not an African, but who played a leading role in the defeat of apartheid. It was the Cuban internationalist forces who defeated the apartheid army in the Battle of Quito Cuernavaca. It was the Cuban internationalist forces who surrounded the apartheid army and forced them to negotiate. Negotiations which led to the end of apartheid, negotiations which led to independence for Namibia, and negotiations which led to the consolidation of the independence of Angola. That is the internationalist spirit we need to uphold. That is the internationalist spirit we need to commit ourselves to. And today, in the face of all of you, distinguished African citizens, today, in the face of all of you, academics from the University of Ghana, I'd like to pay tribute to a very, very special son of Ghana, Captain Kojo Chikata, who took part in those battles in Angola that led to the defeat of apartheid and that led to the consolidation of the independence of Angola and freedom from Namibia. I salute Captain Kojo Chikata, the late Captain Kojo Chikata, on this platform. Finally, I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Fellow Africans, we can do it better. Comrade, thank you so much. So that was a powerful keynote address. And indeed, it was not just an address, but indeed a showdown. A showdown that calls for urgent action for the African to move away from liberation to development. And indeed, that is being done with the leadership factor being considered. And of course, Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jr., a man growing up, I listened to, watched, and drew lots of inspirations from a Pan-Africanist, a journalist, and the General Secretary of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, has done due justice to. Ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens, princes and princesses, I think indeed Comrade deserves a round of applause once again. He's touched on a lot of issues, from economy through to leadership, through to the African citizen, him or herself. But through it all, one thing that was pivotal is that the agenda, or the African Agenda 2063, ought to begin now. And therefore, we need the action now and not to wait till the year 2063. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are committed to begin that action now, please put your hands together for yourself as well, for being able to stay throughout the entire proceedings over here. Let me quickly also remind you that indeed this program is a 2-day conference, which of course day 1 is today. And the conference is actually bent on discussions of ideas, and as well as having deeper conversations on topical issues that truly matters to the development of our dearest continent. And of course, the sessions are in 4 sessions. First of all, we'll be looking at the political leadership. We'll also be looking at the African citizens, the Pan-African agenda, what indeed is the Pan-African agenda, as well as the economic, transformational, and leadership of the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, I am truly excited because after all of these, we'll be having a keynote address by another individual that you would want to always listen to, based on his in-depth knowledge on national development, as well as empowering the youth to know that indeed we are the future of this continent. Each session will actually have a lead speaker, as well as it will be followed by discussions, and we'll have panel discussions doing just that. Also, ladies and gentlemen, participants over here are encouraged to visit the African Rising stands at the foyer to sign the Borderless Africa petition. Borderless African petition is truly ongoing, and we need you to please sign that particular petition as well. And to do that, you have to scan. There is a QR code coming around, so just in case you're unable to go to the foyer to sign, you should also just scan the QR code, which will be going around. It will be going around, so please take it around. Please take it around. You can scan it and then sign this particular petition. So what is the Africa Borderless all about? What is the Africa Rising Borderless petition all about? It is a petition being signed by Africans to get African government to understand or ban visa requirements for fellow Africans, which is aimed at, ensuring free trade and borderless continent. Moving from Togo, I need to have a visa. Moving to Cote d'Ivoire, amidst the African Continental Free Trade Area, having to bear the ups and downs or the hardship of getting visa to these countries, we ought to actually sign this very important petition, so that we send a strong message that indeed for the African tourism space, the African economy to grow, we need to have a borderless continent as well. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're truly excited about that, please do so well to sign this particular petition. At this point, we have a cultural performance, and indeed our gallant men and women are ready to give us something spectacular from what we have as Africans. So the cultural troupe, we are in your hands for the next sessions. And also, right after that, when we come back, we will be having a keynote address by the man I've come to love and appreciate so much. He is in the person of Professor Kwabena Frimpong Boateng, a man that you truly want to listen to. Please stay with us. Culture Troop, we are in your hands, please.
Okay, thank you very much. As our MC introduced, we're going to have Professor Frimpong Boateng, who is going to give his talk on economic transformation. I think his topic is going to be a needful revolution for sustainability and growth.
I think it's already afternoon. Hi, Commissioner. Nana, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my brother, Kwesi Pratt. I'm supposed to talk about Nkrumah's industrialization plan. What did he have in store for us? You know, Kwame Nkrumah was born in 1909. He was Prime Minister from 1957 to 60 and President of Ghana from 60 to 1966. When he died, he was 62 years. Can you imagine that? You may think Nkrumah was 94 years when he died. He was 62, not yet 63. When he came to Ghana at the invitation of UGCC, he was 38. Today, somebody at 38 will say he's a youth organizer of a political party. Youth organizer. Even some 60-year-olds think they are youth organizers, you know. So, Nkrumah was very young, but he was very matured. And when we gained independence from Britain, Nkrumah's led CPP, the Convention People's Party, considered industrialization to be a key factor in the modernization and development of the country. So he developed an extensive program which emphasized import substitution and job creation, and to reduce the dependence on colonial powers. You have to think about going to Nkrumah's mind. He said, and it's very important, so every imported item adds to Ghana's continuing dependence on colonial economic structure. Everything that you import will add to your continued dependence on people. So if we sit in this country and import everything from toothpick to aircraft, then we are in trouble. My brother there, look at the bottom. If we have one, look at the bottom of it. And then see what is written there. So, you are drinking from, I don't know whether the water is Ghanaian, but so Nkrumah believed in industrialization, import substitution, and job creation for the Ghanaian society. And so he placed emphasis on industrialization, manufacturing. And his strategy was develop large-scale, capital-intensive manufacturing industries owned and managed by the state. The government invested heavily in infrastructure and manufacturing activities and established state-owned enterprises for production of items that were previously imported. Now, within a few years, Nkrumah's strategy started yielding results. For example, growth in the manufacturing sector was from 2% share of real GDP in 1957 to 9% in 1969. During the 1960s, manufacturing output grew at a rate of 13%. Manufacturing grew at 13% per annum, while its total share in industrial output increased from 10% in 1960 to 14% in 1970. So results were being achieved. But to do all the industrialization, Nkrumah had to prepare the nation for it. And what did he do? He took very bold steps in preparing Ghana for industrial takeoff. The accelerated education program and the setting up of the Ghana Education Trust enabled the building of secondary and technical schools all over Ghana. And these were the first steps in training the skilled manpower for Ghana's industrialization. To put things into perspective, let me quote a few statements from Kwame Nkrumah. The first ones will be from his sessional address to Parliament on the 1st of February 1966, only 3 weeks before he was overthrown. I quote, "Technical education is also progressing steadily. Already, a technical teacher training college has been built in Kumasi to train teachers. It is expected that within 5 years, this college will have trained an adequate number of technical teachers for our polytechnics technical institutes and training centers. A third government secondary technical school was opened in Obuasi in November last year, that is 1965. And a fourth one under construction in Kufodia is near completion. While technical education advances on the broad front, I have directed that emphasis be laid in the education in science and technology with a view to Ghana producing in the shortest possible time not only the administrators and managers required to implement our development progress, but also the scientists, technologists, technicians needed in industry and agriculture. I continue the quote. At the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, KNUST, the former Faculty of Science has been reconstituted into two faculties, namely Faculty of Applied Science and Faculty of Technology. In the new Faculty of Applied Sciences, courses in meteorology, nuclear physics, applied chemistry have been introduced, while courses in chemical and textile technology and glassware are planned for the Faculty of Technology. Nkrumah reconstituted the Faculty of Science into two faculties, Applied Science and Technology. So you could see where it was coming from. Now, the sad thing is that after the coup in 1966, the National Liberation Council decided to do a few things. The first thing they were doing was to disrupt Nkrumah's education program. For example, several teacher training colleges were closed. Scholarships of Ghanaians studying abroad were withdrawn. And provision of textbooks which enable poor families was stopped. Now, the NSC halted the reconstitution of the Faculty of Science at KNUST into Faculty for Applied Sciences and Faculty of Technology. The courses in nuclear physics aimed at producing qualified scientists for the Kwabenya Atomic Energy Project was abandoned. The importance of meteorology in agricultural countries such as Ghana cannot be overemphasized. The program was stopped. Can you imagine? Studies of the weather pattern to help Ghanaian farmers was stopped. So was the course in applied biochemistry, which is today's biotechnology and biomedical engineering. Nkrumah, with his foresight in establishing such a program, will have enabled Ghana to be at the forefront of today's biotechnology revolution. Nkrumah had that foresight. Sometimes I wonder where he got his ideas from. He wasn't a scientist, and there were not enough scientists in the country to help him, but he had all these ideas. If it had gone on, Ghana would have been a center of serious biotechnology revolution in the world. Now, Nkrumah's achievements in education aimed at preparing Ghana for industrial revolution can be summed up as follows. In the 1964 to 1965 school year, there were 9,988 primary and middle schools with an enrollment of 1.3 million. There were 89 secondary schools with 33,000 students and 47 teacher training colleges with enrollment of 10,000. There were 11 technical schools and 3 universities. All this in a population of 7.5 million. Put Ghana in the lead in Africa. Look at all these things with a population of 7.5. And we were among the well-educated people, not only in Africa, but in the world. The NLC, the National Liberation Council, also sabotaged Nkrumah's program for research and development. And to appreciate this, let me quote again from Nkrumah's last sessional address to Parliament. As I said, on the 1st of February 1966. I quote, "The Academy of Sciences, that is the predecessor of CSIR, which celebrated its anniversary last November, that is 1965, has been rapidly expanding its scope of scientific research activities to provide the necessary scientific and technology base for our economic and social development. Last year, the Academy established no less than 5 new research institutes in the fields of food science and technology, aquatic biology, geology and geophysics, industrial standards, and marine fisheries. Many more institutes are in an advanced stage of physical development and planning. These include glass and ceramic, the Institute of Meteorology, the Institute of Wildlife Research, Institute for Research and Development, and a Center for Production of Scientific Instrumentation. Let me repeat that one again. A Center for the Production of Scientific Instrumentation. The Academy, as a full-time national research organization, is conducting development research required in the utilization of resources of the country. This work should proceed to the pilot plant stage so that the Academy can advise government on the feasibility of agricultural and industrial projects being established by ministries and corporations. The Academy stars the spearhead of the scientific and technological development of the country. The Academy will also assist the universities in the training of postgraduate students by providing facilities in research institutes. What was he saying? He says, look, the CSIR will be at the forefront of R&D, and then they will develop projects to the pilot stage so that government agencies or private institutions can take over that project into commercialization. I mean, this is what America is doing now. Nkrumah had those plans. He says the Ghanaian private sector, now we are saying that the private sector is the engine of growth. The private sector has no knowledge, no skills, no money. So how can the private sector be an engine of growth without government intervention? In all developed countries, especially Britain, the government had a role to play. Nkrumah was saying that CSIR will be at the forefront of research and development, develop a project, and advise government so that ministries and corporations can take over those products into commercialization. And this was very commendable indeed. So Nkrumah was using state resources to develop projects and scientific work. So Nkrumah wanted to use Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, but was sabotaged by the NLC. And of all the institutes that I mentioned, the NLC scrapped all of them except the Institute for Industrial Research. Now, let's look at the implications. We had, or we still have, iron ore in Opomanso, somewhere in the western region. We have manganese and bauxite. And Nkrumah intentionally was developing the technology to make use of iron ore. That was sabotaged. And what is happening now? We have one known deposit of manganese in Ghana, in Suta. People are exploiting that mineral. And this is, if you want to produce stainless steel, you need manganese. If you want to produce colored glass, stained glass, you need manganese. Now, if we exploit all this manganese and we don't have any manganese, and at some point Ghana needs to produce stainless steel, we cannot do that with iron ore alone. We have to go and buy manganese from somewhere. But we are looking on with when foreigners are exploiting this manganese, and there's no strategic thinking about the use of our resources. Now, Nkrumah was really ahead of his people as far as science and technology is concerned, the use of science, technology, and innovation in national development. Let me again quote a statement from Nkrumah. We are already making every effort to raise both the number and quality of scientists who come from our universities. and to raise the standards of science teaching in our schools. We have made great progress in this field. Much more remains to be done. There are not nearly enough Ghanaian scientists and Ghanaian technicians of all kinds for the work we have on hand. Even the finest laboratory, the best equipment, or indeed the best reactor will not produce scientific work on its own accord. Only men and women can do that, and only after long and highly specialized training in scientific techniques. Hence, we need to press on with the greatest urgency the scientific and technological training of young Ghanaians. Every boy or girl who shows talent in this direction must be encouraged and helped, because such talent is especially precious to us, and we must foster and guard it. Our universities, the various institutes of the Academy of Sciences, the University of College of Science Education in Cape Coast, our newly established medical school, and the proposed University College of Agriculture will help in producing this training. We need also to reach out to the mass of the people who have not had the opportunity of formal education. We must use every means of mass communication, the press, the radio, television, and films to carry science to the whole population of Ghana. I continue the quote. Last year, as part of the Academy Anniversary celebrations, there was a science exhibition in Accra. This year, there has been another one in Kumasi. Similar exhibitions have been held in our universities in Kumasi and Accra. The enthusiastic response to these exhibitions and the eager way in which our young men and women studied the exhibits was most encouraging. The projected Science Museum, when completed next year, will provide this kind of exhibition in a permanent form. This is a major project which will play a great part in exciting public interest in science and conveying in a direct and vivid way the impact of science on everyday life. It is most important that our people should not only be instructed in science, but that they should take part in it, apply it themselves in their own ways. For science is not just a subject to be learned out of books or from a teacher, it is a way of life, a way of tackling any problem which one can only master by using it for oneself. We must have science clubs in which our people can develop their own talents, discovery, and invention. This is what, to understand what Chrissy Pratt was saying, that the people will have to be exposed to this and they will learn it at their own pace in their own wisdom. Now, this quotation is part of a speech delivered by Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah at the laying of the foundation stone of Ghana's atomic reactor at Kobenya on the 24th of November 1964. The Science Museum, which he referred to, that was supposed to be completed in 1965, was completed only a few years ago, and it was not put under the Ministry of Science and Technology, but under the Ministry of Culture, Tourism, and Arts. Now, Nkrumah was trying to say that every Ghanaian should think scientifically, not abstract science, but simple things. We should be able to describe and estimate things. We should be able, his wish was that the average Ghanaian will be able to estimate volumes, weight, distance, and areas. Now, in modern day Ghana, one still encounters engineers who describe volumes of sand and stone in trips. I'm going to give you 10 trips of sand. It's not expressed in volumes. Even a lonka of gari or rice has found its way into budget statements. I don't know how many Ghanaians know the sizes, the areas of their rooms. But elsewhere, the average person, even the children, will know that my bedroom is 25 square meters. Or the area of my house is about 2,000 square meters. And Nkrumah wanted science to be practiced, to be understood by people. And Ghana appears to be one of the few countries in the world where we go to the market and things are not weighed. You don't weigh anything. This is not science for the people. Now, let me quote another statement from Nkrumah. It is within the possibility of science and technology to make even the Sahara bloom into a vast field with verdant vegetations for agricultural and industrial development. We shall harness radio, television, giant printing presses to lift our people from the dark recesses of illiteracy. This is the age in which science has transcended the limits of the physical world, and technology has invaded the silences of nature. Time and space have been reduced to unimportant abstractions. Giant machines make roads, clear forests, dig dams, and lay out airports. Monster trucks and planes distribute goods. Huge laboratories manufacture drugs, and complicated geological surveys are made possible at great speed. The world is no more moving through the bush path or on camels and donkeys. We cannot afford to pace our needs, our development, our security to the gate of camels and donkeys. In other words, we cannot wait till 2063. This is because we have emerged in the age of science and technology in which poverty, ignorance, and disease are no longer our masters, but the retreating foes of mankind. This is Nkrumah at the OAU conference on the 24th of May, 1963. So I'm just quoting these things for you to know that he had a vision, the drive, the skills to move us on. Nkrumah knew that to industrialize, you will need banking system, management skills, knowledge, and technology which our people did not have. From 1957 to 66, Nkrumah did not have a fraction of the people that we have now. The technocrats, the architects, engineers, pharmacists, nurses, teachers, scientists, and all the tools that we have now. Certainly, there was no GPS, there was no internet, there was no mobile phone, even no fax machines. But he was able to achieve a lot. Nkrumah did not have the people. That was why he was training people, setting up institutions to train people. Now, we have the people in abundance, and we don't know what to do with them. We have challenges in Africa, in Ghana. I believe that the people to solve these challenges are here in the diaspora. We only have to find them. But that is not where our leaders are looking at, or that's not where their thinking is. You know, Nkrumah, despite his shortcomings, in other words, not his own personal feelings, but the fact that he did not have the people at hand when he started his program, he had to train them from scratch. Despite that, his approach was systematic, and he established integrated industries, unlike what you have now in the form of 1D, 1F, which are disjointed small and middle-scale industries scattered across the country with no science and technology underpinnings. Nkrumah had the sense to establish CSIR so that it would guide industrialization and improve products. Why did he have to do all these things? Let's see what Nkrumah had in 1957 when he took over as prime minister. If you look at the secondary school in the country, in Cape Coast, there were in Fansipim, Adisada, St. Augustine's, Holy Child, and Wesley Girls. Accra, we had Achimota School, Accra Academy, and Odogono secondary schools. Kumasi had Prempeh College and Ho Mauli. These were all the secondary schools that we had in the Gold Coast. There was only one university, the University College of Gold Coast, which became University of Ghana on the 1st of October 1961 by an act of parliament. And Nkrumah became the first chancellor of that university. He was concerned, so he wanted to be hands-on to lead the university. And we had Nana Kwabena Ketia, the fourth, Omahino of Esikado, as the interim vice chancellor. And the industries that we had were, in Accra, we had the Accra Brewery, Crystal Oil Mills, a pomade factory by A.G. Seaboard, British company, a toffee factory, and steel fabrication by Dorman Long. Kumasi had a biscuit factory, NASA biscuit factory, a few timber mills, and 2 soft drinks factories, and 1 rice mill. And then Tusker cigarette, which was later sent to Takoradi. Other industries in Ghana were some mines, oil mills, timber plywood, and lime juice in Asebu. The main exports were cocoa, gold, timber, bauxite, manganese, palm oil, and palm kernels from wild growth. We see that things haven't changed much. No export of industrial goods and services. And the railways were the main revenue for government those days. We had a few shops in the country: UTC, UAC, GB Olivant, SCOA, CFAO, French again, and then some Indian shops. The banks that we had were Standard Bank and Barclays. The main harbor was Takoradi. So Nkrumah had work to do. The power sources that we had were small diesel generators and some steam generators. These are not the power sources that will enable you to industrialize the country. That is why he embarked on the construction of the Akosombo Dam, which was completed in 1965, not long before he was overthrown. The population at the time was about 4.5 million, with a per capita income of $400. Literacy rate, 2%. So Nkrumah had a job to do. That is why he embarked on what he did. But in spite of all these shortcomings, while he was training the people, he embarked on certain projects that were vital for what he wanted to do. He did extensions to Kolebu Hospital at the cost of £5 million. He built Job 600. For the young ones, Job 600 is that building, tall building close to Parliament House, where the parliamentarians have their offices. It was built by SCC, Ghanaians. Now you don't see any Ghanaian company doing anything, not even KVIPs. Nkrumah built a Pediasi Lodge at the cost of £6 million. He built the Kole Lagoon Bridge, 2.5 million, Atlantic City Hotel, Kumasi City Hotel, the new Bank of Ghana, a new commercial bank, built a jute factory for the cocoa industry, then cocoa silo at Tema. That is what our brother Kusi Pat was referring to, at £8.5 million. He built a college of administration, I think here. And he built the army barracks in Tema, the army barracks in Sunyani, Tema Airfield, Army Officers Bungalow at Burma Camp, the Air Force quarters, built the YMCA, a new government transport terminal in Kumasi, another government transport terminal in Accra, built the Black Star Square, what we now call the Independence Square, then block of flats for the Volta River Authority, high-rise blocks for the income tax, the museum in Accra, a new police headquarters in Accra, prison quarters, prison warders quarters, police quarters at Tesano Airport and Mamprobi, new judges bungalows, new animal husbandry at Labi, Star Hotel, printing press at Tema. He did all this between 1966 and 1961, 1966. 5 years, less than 5 years. But then, these projects do not include those that were not entirely completed. For example, the petroleum refinery at Tema was not just about to be completed. The dry dock, which was the biggest at the time in Africa. And then he built a 22,000-acre rubber plantation in the western region. I'll come to that in a short while. And then a gold refinery at Tema, Takwa, which was not completed. Then the state housing projects. Akosombo, as I said, was completed in 1965 because Nkrumah needed power for his industrialization. Again, in consonance with prevailing trends in the developed world, he set up a number of well-planned integrated industries, including cocoa processing, as we heard, the golden tree. And it was supported with science. At that time, we had the WACRI, the West Africa Cocoa Research Institute in Tafo, which Nkrumah changed to Cocoa Research Institute. And then we had glass manufacturing, ceramics, tires, terrazzo, prefab buildings, and some of them can be seen. He developed these prefabricated building panels, bricks, so as to hasten the pace of construction of houses for, especially for the middle and lower class. Meat processing, leather, shoe, glue, rubber. So if you are going to produce shoes, you know you are going to need glue. You are not going to need meat, hide. And so he did all these things. Then the steel works to be supported by Upon Manso, as I said. Nkrumah was going to take the steel from here, the manganese from Suta, to create stainless steel for our industry. But then after, when he left, everything was disintegrated. People are mining the manganese with reckless abandon. Very soon we may not have any manganese. And when we come to processing our stainless steel, we may have to import manganese from China. He embarked on textiles and garments supported by large cotton farms, sugar production, jute bags, as I've said, Tema Food Complex to process miscellaneous food, flour, fish, feed, and so on, mash factory, cement works, distillation plants, and so on. So, as I said, one admirable thing that I find about Nkrumah's project were some of the things were the vertical and horizontal integration. Now, look at the meat factory. He sited it in Bolgatanga in the north. Because those days, a lot before he embarked on his cattle production in the Volta region, I'll tell you why he did that. All the animals were coming from the north or from our northern neighbors, Niger, Burkina Faso, and so on. So you come to Bolgatanga, the animal is bought, is processed. You don't have to wait, start it in Kumasi or somewhere for the cattle to be brought down, destroying farms, as we are seeing now with this so-called Fulani farmer interface and the violence. So the animal we bought in Bolgatanga, and then it will go to the meat processing factory. But why did Nkrumah cite his cattle rearing in Volta region? Because there, he saw that we had 2 rainy seasons as opposed to 1 in the north, so that he could get fodder for the animals. A lot of thinking went into what he did. So we had this meat factory. In transport and communication, Nkrumah established a new harbor at Tema with a new city, and then created reliable intercity and West African transport systems with the state transport buses, Ghana Airways, based at the Accra Airport, Black Star Lines. You know, those days, Black Star Line had a lot of ships. And people in New York, some Americans, will go to the harbor and wait to verify whether it is true that ships are coming from the west coast of Africa manned by black people alone. And they were shocked that we had Ghanaians doing all these things. So this is what was happening. And then the river transport, we had the Yape Queen and the railway system. When I was a child, or a student, traveling from Kumasi to my school in Secondary College, which is the best school in Ghana, we didn't have, there was no direct road way from Kumasi to Secondary. We traveled by train. That's all I knew. We had a sleeper, what we call the sleeper, that will leave Kumasi at 9, between 9 and 10, and get to Secondary at 6 o'clock. And then we had the Express Africana, very fast, and then the Blue Train. I mean, you young ones, you didn't see anything, you know. So the train system was working, but everything, Ghana appears to be a place where, with time, things deteriorate. You know, we don't improve on things. But Nkrumah did all these things. Man, let me tell you about some very outstanding projects that he did in agriculture. I said earlier on that he established a 22,000-acre rubber plantation in the western region. You know Bonsa. And at that time, he did it in 5 years. It was a record. It was the second largest plantation in Africa, second after the 100,000-acre plantation established by Firestone in Liberia. And Nkrumah's plan was that the 20,000 was going to be increased to 75,000 acres. And it was believed that with a lifespan of 70 years, those 75,000 acres could have paid for all the loans that Nkrumah took for all the projects that he did, from Akosombo Dam to the Marsh Factory. This was the vision of the man we are talking about now. And then he established, as I said, Ghana Airways, manned by beautiful Ghanaian pilots. Not only that, we also had a gliding school, probably one of the few on the African continents, where airplanes without engines, you go up with the help of an aircraft, you are released, and you glide. And that gliding school was at Afienya, and it was under the command of a lady called Hannah Reich, a German who was here to help Nkrumah. He wrote a book with the title, I stayed, it's a German thing, that's what I went to Ghana and flew for Nkrumah. That was the title of his book, of her book. So Nkrumah also invested on large-scale palm oil production, cola, coconut, cotton, sugarcane. Now, some people are talking about tree crop production. It was started long ago, and it was very successful, except that things were not taken good care of, were sold. The state farms set up 104 farms, and the biggest poultry farm in Africa was here in Accra, at a place we now call Akokofoto. That is where the name Akokofoto came from. That's where Nkrumah established his poultry farm close to Dansuman. And then he also established one of the biggest cotton farms on the west coast at Zongo Masheri, 1,000 acres, Kenaf, and so on. And the cattle, he also had a program in Volta region that went into insemination. And he had 1,000 head cattle farm in Kwamoso. And when the PNDC took over, a week later, all the cattle were gone. Nkrumah did a lot. CSIR, as I said, was to be spearhead the development of the factories. And initially, the emphasis of Nkrumah was on science and technology and agriculture. But when he was overthrown, the subsequent governments reduced CSIR into 13 institutes. 8 of them are for agriculture. 8 of them: animal research, crops research, forestry research, food research, oil palm research, plant genetic resource research institute, Savannah Agricultural Research Institute in Tamari, and then a soil research. The science and technology component of these things were minimized. And the sad thing was that instead of equipping and resourcing CSIR, they were told to find their own money for the research. So CSIR, as it is now, is not getting enough subvention even to pay themselves. So the research is gone down. They are always looking for money for their activities. So I was talking about the role of CSIR in Nkrumah's plan. Nkrumah established a Bosso grass factory in the western region, not only to produce bottles, but it was to form the basis of grass industry for products such as fiber optics, fiberglass, automotive windshields. The Bonsa tire factory too. And then the Sanyo electronic factories in Tema was established to assemble initially radio and television sets, and later on fridges as well. But there were plans to produce resistors, capacitors, circuit boards, semiconductors, and chips. But everything went down after Nkrumah. So to summarize, I have to stop now because I can see that some people's blood sugar levels are coming down, and I don't want anybody to curse the professor for allowing them to collapse. So Nkrumah's program was solid. He knew what he was doing. There was scientific basis. He knew the progression. Just as we have in South Korea, he saw all these examples. We started some research, CSIR, they went into semiconductor, LCD, liquid crystal things, and now they are world leaders in television, mobile phones, and so on. But almost 60 years after Nkrumah, we are still embarking on industrialization that is far inferior to what he started. I will end my presentation with a few statements on the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission to tell you how Nkrumah started it and where we are now. In 1961, Nkrumah decided to undertake the nuclear reactor project. And he had certain objectives. Project was to be a research reactor designed solely for research, training, and the production of radioisotopes, which we use in the hospital for diagnosis and the treatment of cancer. But his long-term objective was to train researchers, the manpower for the establishment of a nuclear power plant for electricity generation in Ghana. That was his long-term objective, producing electricity using nuclear energy for Ghana. And so to do that, he established the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission in 1961 by an Act of Parliament, Act 204. So on February 28, 1961, in Moscow, Nkrumah signed an agreement with the Soviet Union for the establishment of the nuclear station in Kwabenya. The agreement was that the Soviet Union would provide all the material that were not available in Ghana, the isotopes, laboratory, and everything that was needed to establish the Ghana Atomic Energy Project. The design reactor had a capacity of 2,000 kilowatt. 2,000 kilowatt, keep that in mind. The project was supposed to be completed in 1965. In 1965, a prominent Soviet atomic scientist, one Daniel Simonenko, came to Accra, gave lectures here in Legon for local atomic researchers. By that time, when he was here, all the components for the reactor were around, some assembled, and close to the completion of the project. And then the coup came in 1966. And the construction of the nuclear center was frozen. Now, here comes the interesting part. The NLC government, the National Redemption Council government, invited a gentleman from Britain, Sir John Douglas Cockcroft, to review the Ghana reactor project. And this man said that you have Akosombo, so who should be there for 20 years or so, so there's no need for nuclear energy from your reactor. He turned the thing upside down. Nkrumah was not, at the time, going to, the nuclear energy was a long-term objective. In fact, even now, if you want to build a nuclear power plant, it will take you 20, 15, 20, or maybe 25 years before you are able to construct it. So the objective of a science education in nuclear physics, production of radioisotope for hospitals and for other uses, and the other applications of, peaceful applications of nuclear energy were ignored. So NLC abandoned the project, canceled it. So it was in, records show that the project was 90% completed. What was left was the core, the nuclear core that was on the high seas, which never arrived. And it was rumored that the Americans intercepted it on the high seas and sent it to USA. I don't know the truth about that. And the sad thing is that Ghanaian scientists who were responsible for the project were dismissed, including Professor G.K. Tete, Professor Amos, Professor Corsa, Professor Ephraim, and others. Some of them left for the US, and some of them to the University of Ghana, and others left and did their own thing. So it was in 1973, the coup was in 1966. It was in 1973 that General Kutu Echampong asked the University of Cape Coast to review the nuclear program again. And this time, their recommendation was positive. They said it was feasible and it should be restarted. So 11 years after overthrow of Nkrumah in 1976, the government of Ghana appealed again to the Soviet Union to come and reactivate the reactor project. A long time has passed, and the Soviet people needed to reassess the reactor. So they went on to do it. And they had to do it because the atomic energy has raised the capacity from 2,000 kilowatt to 5,000 kilowatt. But before they could finish their revision process, the coup came in 1979, and the project was scrapped again. Liman tried to revive it with an appeal to the German government, but the negotiations fell through. So it was in 1995 that Jerry Rollins approached the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Chinese government, and they came and installed a miniature neutron source reactor with a capacity of 30 kilowatts. We wanted 2,000, 5,000, but they gave us 30 kilowatt that cannot produce any isotopes, but good for some research. And so this reactor was commissioned in 1995. So you can see that after the overthrow of Nkrumah in 1966, it was in 1995 that a miniature research reactor was installed again in Kwabinya. So you see the time that we lost. And that was not alone. This was a miniature reactor costing just $1.4 million, which was paid for by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Ghana spent $200,000 to construct the building which housed the reactor. This small reactor used high enriched uranium. High enriched uranium that can be used for other things, including production of dirty bombs and so on. And this was not palatable to the world international community. So they said it should be changed from high enriched uranium to low enriched uranium. And this was done with the help, together with the Americans, the Chinese Atomic Energy Agency, and Ghana Atomic Energy Agency. It took 3 years to do this. And the conversion from high enriched uranium to low enriched uranium was completed in 2017. So Ghanaians, your atomic energy that was started in 1961 was effectively completed in 1995, 2017, with a small reactor using low enriched uranium. This is where we are. I don't think Nkrumah will have allowed this thing to happen. So this is in summary what Nkrumah tried to do. He was yes above his people and even many Ghanaians. I personally don't know where he got his ideas from, but it is sad that he was overthrown, and those who overthrew him, as if they had a blueprint to destroy the things that he has started, even education system, scrapping programs, and making sure that research and development didn't go on, that the production of scientific instrumentation was stopped, atomic energy was stopped, and this contributed in bringing Ghana to its knees, and also the enthusiasm, the drive was lost, and it is yet to be rekindled. And this is where we need transformational thinkers' leadership to make sure that at least we link up to where Nkrumah was, and then Ghana will be a better place. So if we don't do that, we'll continue to depend upon foreigners for 80% of inputs into agriculture, education, and health. And 100% of our budget will be financed from outside. Without outside help, we cannot balance our budget. We cannot live that way. We may depend upon foreigners for a short period, but it should not be the permanent feature of our lives that we depend upon people all the time for everything that we need. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
Prof, thank you so much. So, Prof, please, we can do it better for Prof. Prof, we would want you to please take the middle seat for us because you would be our very chairman for this all-important conversation and panel session that we're about to have at the moment. So the middle seat, please give it up for Prof as he takes a seat. Indeed, he has brought us or given us a journey up to how Nkrumah, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah truly wanted the continent, or particularly Ghana, to be in terms of energy, in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of economic growth as well. And indeed, all of those projects has been cut short, and therefore we need a transformational leaders at this particular point in time. But Prof, you are going to be our chairman for this all-important session, but Prof is not going to do that alone. Prof will be joined by other distinguished panelists who would actually join us to do the discussions and have thorough conversations about this particular subject matter regarding economic transformation and leadership, economic transformational and leadership, as well as we look at the topic or the issue of leadership in industry and enterprise, a needful revolution for sustainability and growth. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're super excited about this topic, please put your hands together for yourself. And before I introduce the discussant or the panelist, I would want to quickly pass this information that in a quest to mitigate reducing plastic waste, we have a dispenser available. So just in case you care for water, please do so well to get closer to the dispenser and then have a drink of quality water as well. But our first panelist is Mr. Kwabena A.A. Mensah, who is a database management and information technology consultant. Please give it up for Kwabena A.A. Mensah as he joins us here. Okay, please give it up for him as he joins us here, Kwabena A.A. Mensah. And next is Dr. Yao Ban, who is the Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress. Dr. Yao Ban, I understand he will be joining us pretty shortly. Please, yes, please, you can take the very first seat. And next would be Honorable Kisembo Rex Tendo. Honorable Kisembo Rex Tendo is from Uganda, and he is a youth activist. Please, Rex, you can join us up here, please. Please give it up for Rex as he makes his way here. And Dr. Ban, okay, so, Prof, you can. Right. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would want to indulge you that I would be the moderator for this great conversation. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Please, if you're super excited about it, please put your hands together. Right. So, Mr. Chairman, I would want to have your initial take on the issue. We truly appreciate the extent of in-depth knowledge that you've given us about the transformational leadership that we truly need and how Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, through his leadership skills, was bent on economic development, social development, educational development, and health infrastructure to a very large extent, particularly energy as well. Of course, energy truly matters to every industry player. We're looking at leadership in industry and enterprises at the back of economic transformation and leadership. Prof, I would want to have your initial reaction or comment on this particular issue in the context of Ghana and the African continent at large. Do we truly have the leaders in the respective institutions, particularly the industries as well? I think you can use this microphone, please. Yes, I think, Prof, you can.
Thank you very much for this important question. It's difficult because the governments in Africa are very powerful. We tend to say, for example, in Ghana, we are saying that the private sector is the engine of growth.
Is that truly the reality?
I don't think so, because, see, if the engine is down on the ground and the car is somewhere, you need to repair the engine, equip it, and put fuel in it, before it can, it can power the car. So, as I said in my presentation, if the private sector has no skills, no knowledge, no money, no avenue for R&D, how can it survive? The government has a role. You have to develop things to a stage, or would the government partner with the private sector in a meaningful way so that products can be developed and then eventually be taken over by the private sector, as is happening in US and many other industrial countries.
Very well. I would also want to engage the panelists to have some reactions to Prof's comments. Prof actually doubts whether indeed we have true leaders and also the infrastructure or the system to ensure that we have transformational leadership within the industry, which is truly needed for a sustainability and growth within the industry space. Mr. Kisimbo, let me take your reaction to Prof's comments.
Thank you so much. In the first place, I bring you comradeship greetings from Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, and East African community. I will tender in my apology for starters because I prepared for a different session, not this very session. So honestly, I will stop it at that. Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, on that score, you are in Uganda and you are a youth activist.
Yes.
Indeed, you have industries, you have, you talk about leadership on the continent, and indeed, Uganda is not different. I mean, you truly tell us the situation in Uganda. What is the state of your, do you get to see the transformational leadership that we truly need in our respective individuals? Prof actually touched on the fact that the government in Ghana is dependent on the private sector, that the private sector is the engine for development. What is the case in Uganda?
Well, in my country, the government is pushing for what they call the private sector-led growth.
Okay, same as Ghana here, Prof?
Same as Ghana
Okay.
here. But of course, the challenge remains the issue of value addition. When you look at what Africa is known for, by and large is production of raw materials. And we are known for exporting these raw materials. So, for example, our president is pushing hard to see that we stop the exportation of raw materials. So industries are coming up to do value addition. The coffee, of course, and iron ore. The president has put a directive that we no longer have to export iron ore in its raw state. We need to do value addition. So I see that.
And are you doing it? Is it happening, or it is just a talk?
No, it is happening. For example, coffee and iron, we have seen already factories are being set up to do the processing of this. So literally, we are also discouraging the importation of what they call in Kiswahili mitumba, used clothes. So we grow our cotton. Factories have been set up so that we can be able to produce our own clothes to reduce on the dependence from abroad.
Very well. So, I mean, our panelists here would have their turn, but of course, the audience, you would also be part of this particular conversation. You are not left out because we truly, to have a conversation on this particular subject matter, we need everyone's input. So, please, you also seated here and joining us on our Zoom platform as well too. Your questions are truly welcome to this particular all-important conversation. But let me bring in the database management and information technology consultant, Kwabena A.A. Mensah. First of all, I mean, the backbone of everything ought to be hinged around data. From where you sit, do we have the data that clearly shows the number of industries that we have in Ghana or on the continent? And what is the case or the issue of data collection like at the moment?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks very much. You've taken me by surprise there because that is my specialist subject.
Exactly.
And I thought there wouldn't be an opportunity actually to share ideas in that area. I'm happy to do so, but just to follow on from what Professor said, because I'd like us to deal with the high-level issue before we come to the detail. So the previous question that you asked, which was about whether we were actually doing private sector-led development, it leads me to consider really what is the project that we're engaged in. It is true that everyone has heard this phrase, private sector-led development, and I take note of my fellow panelist from Uganda with his reference to private sector-led growth. There's a difference of substance between the two. Let me take a look at private sector-led development, because I think this begins to address the question of what is the transformation that we're seeking? Where is it that we're trying to go? And then how do we get there? Data is part of how we get there.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you'll forgive me, I'd like to try a little bit of an experiment with the audience, because I see that most of our audience here are fairly youthful, if I may say so. So can I ask how you react to the suggestion that the length of the maximum term of a president, I'm assuming that most of us here are Ghanaians. If this doesn't apply to you, then please forgive me. But if we've all heard the statement that the maximum length of time that an individual is entitled to serve as president under the Constitution is, can anyone give me that answer? It's common knowledge.
4 years or 8 years?
The maximum length of
8
time.
years. 8 years.
I've heard 8. Does anyone have any other answers? No. Is there anybody who objects strongly to the suggestion that 8 years is the maximum length of time that a president can serve under our Constitution? No one. Okay. It turns out that everybody says the maximum term that a president can serve is 8 years. But if you actually read the Constitution, and I'll spare you the detail, it's 10 years. Yes, everyone is surprised. Rather than go into the detail, if someone wants me to explain, I will. But the reason I conduct this experiment is to make the point that just because people say things all the time doesn't mean that they are true. So when you hear people repeating phrases, as we've heard, like the private sector is the engine of growth, I wish someone would give me just 10 pesos for every time a public official responsible for development had said not something to echo Prof's detailed exposition of Kwame Nkrumah's agenda for development, but just the cliche, the private sector is the engine of growth. If I'd earned 10p for every time that statement had been made, I wouldn't be here. I would like us to interrogate the matter of the private sector and its role. And the proposition that I want to put to us is that one can tell especially from Prof's brilliant description, his description and his analysis of the thinking behind the Nkrumah era agenda development program, is that it insisted on a leading role for the state, for the public sector. And it's important that we absorb what the significance of that is, because we have departed from that model. We departed from it formally in 1982. I would argue that all our administrations, military, civilian, this party, that party, from 1951, well, let's say 1957, until 1982, accepted the consensus at the time that development implied a leading role for the state. Indeed, let me try another cliche. the government doesn't do business. The government should get out of the business of business, right? We've all heard that. But let me ask you, so what is the role of the private sector? What have you heard over and over again? What is the motivation of the private sector? Any ideas?
To create jobs and make money.
Profit. That's pretty much the definition of it. Have you ever heard anyone say that the role of the private sector is to do development?
Contribute in a way.
No, I said to do. I'll add a little detail there. Basically, it's not. It wouldn't make sense. So, private sector led development. When I hear that, I wonder, if it's not the business of the private sector, why are we not just assigning it the responsibility for development, but then giving it the leading role? Where is the state? We have all heard this message over and over and over again. Basically, to simplify it, private good, public bad. And over the last 40 years, we have been pursuing this model. So it's taken us from serious economic crisis, from the brink of collapse in 1982. You probably weren't born then, but the prof will confirm that Ghana came close to collapse in 1982 and 1983. Yes, there were causes, but we won't go into that. But over 40 years, we have been pursuing this idea that the private sector will lead us to the promised land
and
of
indeed,
development.
the question that we get to ask at the back of that is that, have the private sector done so?
Well, I think the answer goes without saying.
Right. Mr. Chairman, please pardon me to also engage you on this. In the submission of Comrade Kwesi Pratt, he made mention that the channel to development is socialism and not capitalism. Indeed, as you rightly said, the private sector at the back of capitalism and then socialism, for development. But in as much as there ought to be a balance, have we as a country been able to find that balance where indeed everyone is responsible? Because others have argued that capitalism is the root cause of corruption. And therefore, we're saying that in a lot of the institutions, that even someone is heading a public institution but still has a private business doing some way. And his mind is, how do I grow my business, first of all, before that of the institution that I head? So how do we find a balance in the best interest of the country? Prof, please let me pass the microphone to...
Well, personally, I don't want to strike any difference between capitalism or socialism. Look at what is happening in China. Are they capitalists or they are socialists? Just go ahead and do your business. Get your scientists, build your technology, and set up your industries, and earn the money for the state, and then take care of the citizens, their education. If we talk about socialism in the sense that you have to make sure that people have good education, they have good health, the transportation system is good, and social services are all right, that is my sense of socialism. But creating wealth and making profit and making money cannot be said to be socialist ideas. You have to combine both. Look, if we take Germany, for example, there are socialist inclined parties, they come to power, but they still do help in creating wealth and taking care of their citizens. So what we need is to make sure that nobody falls through the net, that people are taken care of, people get food to eat, they get good health, they can educate their children and lead happy lives.
Prof, I asked that at the back of the numerous... Prof, please on you. I asked that at the back of the numerous good things that we've touted Nkrumah to have done.
Yes.
And Nkrumah did so at the back of socialism, or with the ideology of socialism. Unless maybe I am proving that it isn't so. But why is it that after his overthrow, and we were bent to believe in the idea of capitalism and private sector led and stuff like that, we still are unable to meet the benchmark that Nkrumah raised?
No, Nkrumah was socialist in the sense that he wanted to work for the poor, create money or create wealth and cater for the poor.
What is the
But
purpose of government?
You see, if we look at Britain, I mean, they also did the same thing. The state had a lot of control over railways and a lot of enterprises until Margaret Thatcher came and then dismantled all these things. For a new developing country, you need the state in setting the tone, establishing things, and then handing over certain aspects to the private sector with state help. So that is very important. Let's not divide. In our setup, it will not work, that we want to be socialized. What is the meaning of that?
Okay. So in our setup, it wouldn't work, even in the 21st century.
We have to combine
We
the
have
two.
to combine the two, which of course that is. But okay, so Prof, I mean, please pass the microphone to Kisembo. Kisembo, I would still want you to bring us up to speed. What is Uganda doing right that you think other African countries ought to emulate? Prof said we have to combine, and as you rightly said, in Uganda, it's a private sector led. But I mean, we're looking at leadership in industries and enterprise as well. What is Uganda doing right?
Thank you. I would like to talk about privatization and regulation.
Privatization and regulation.
Regulation, yes.
Okay.
In Uganda, when the current government of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, in 1986, when the NRA took power, they brought in place a privatization. Most of the government parastatals and companies were all privatized. And to us, initially, we saw some bit of sanity and progress in how things were happening. As the Prof put it, government is not known for doing business. The private sector is the one that is looking towards making profit. But government is also dangerous for African governments to sell off these parastatals and take a back seat. That's why I talked about privatization and regulation. Whether it is the academic sector, whether medical, infrastructure, whatever project that government is in charge, we've seen this all over Africa, that they are failing. As you put it, if you have a government officer who is in charge of a certain parastatal, you find the same officer at the side when it comes to procurement. Maybe he's having a separate company registered and is doing business, trying to supply government, and at the same time, this is now an avenue for siphoning government money. So it would be clear to me, thinking aloud, that yes, privatization, if government privatizes and then takes the regulatory role so that the ordinary citizen is not manipulated and taken advantage of, I would think that would help.
Right, but I mean, at the back of that, let me bring in Nana, Mr. Kwabena A.A. Mensah. At the back of privatization and its I mean, importance, or how important it is, we've seen a lot of state-owned enterprises being privatized. And again, as a country, our natural resources, we have leased to some private entities, and therefore the state do not have majority of shares in that. How is the idea or the quest of privatization to the detriment of the development of the country that we truly need? Because a clear example is the oil that we discovered in somewhere 2010. We're all excited about this. We have found oil. But Prof, as you rightly said, what is our percentage of earnings in that particular oil exploration at the back of privatization? How is privatization really doing a lot of harm to our dearest country and the continent?
Well, thanks. Yeah, this is a deep conversation. I want to start by making sure that we are not being misunderstood. Well, I'm not being misunderstood. So let me start with that. I mean, most people, again, the cliche is that you echoed it there, and I think our comrade from Uganda did too. The presumption is that the state mismanages enterprise. Well, which is the most profitable company in the world today? The answer is Saudi Aramco. It's state-owned. And if you look at the list of the most profitable companies in the world, it includes other state-owned companies, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, China Construction Bank, the Agricultural Bank of China. Now, the reason Chinese banks or Chinese enterprises are featuring in that list is precisely because the model they have adopted is a state-led model. It's not an ism. There's a good article that people might want to read. It's the title is, it's about Deng Xiaoping, who is the transformational leader of modern China, by the way. It's let me say that he lasted only a few years into the 30 to 40 years that it has taken them to perform the greatest transformational development in human history. So it's not about the individual, it's about the ideas. The Chinese have gone out of their way to emphasize the role of the state, but not to the exclusion of anything. It is that